Radio for Justice brings you up to the minute news and conversation around the criminal legal system in Colorado and beyond. Welcome to Up to the Minute.
Welcome to Up to the Minute with Colorado Radio for Justice. I am Tiffany McCoy.
And I'm Trevor Jones, co-host and storyteller with Colorado Radio for Justice.
And we are here today with our guest, Kyle Giddings, from Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but I'll say it 10 times fast. Thanks so much for having me, guys. It's good to be here with you.
So, could you tell us just a little bit for our listeners, what is the CCJRC?
Yeah. So the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition was founded 25 years ago. A lot of folks probably have heard of us on the inside between our newsletter and the Go Guide, all things that we produce to help support folks who are inside the carceral system. But our aim is to just advance public safety through community reinvestment and not investing it into cops, courts, and cages. So we're doing a lot of advocacy and policy changes at the Capitol to make sure that public safety is not just so focused on putting people in jail and prison, and that it's investing into the resources that they may need, making sure people struggling with addiction have access to treatment and mental health issues, helping people resolve and get resource. It's just resource community. And so 25 years later, here we are in the middle of another legislative session. This is Christy Donner, who's our executive director. This is her 24th legislative session. And but happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it. And thanks for the introduction on what you guys do.
You mentioned that right now we're in a legislative session.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there anything that we should know about that's going on right now?
Oh gosh, what isn't there going on right now that you guys should know about? So yeah, I'll just run you through like some of our priority bills, and then also like talk about how the folks that are very working towards a much more tough on crime narrative and policy agenda are using things at the legislative session to move their tough on crime agenda. So one of our priority bills is Senate Bill 1, which is the Colorado Voting Rights Act. And that usually it's like, what are you guys doing in voting rights? But we've worked since 2005 to help reestablish voting rights for folks in Colorado, starting with just adding a word to a bill that then suddenly re-enfranchised everyone serving a misdemeanor sentence in jails. So in Colorado, if you're serving a misdemeanor or pretrial in a county jail, you're eligible to vote, which is a vast majority of the people sitting in the county jail system. And so starting that in 2005 we launched the first in-person voting event inside of a Colorado jail in 2020. So people that were incarcerated able to go cast their ballots in person. And then this past year, Senate Bill 72, we created a mandate that every jail in Colorado has to hold in-person voting events in their jail. And we saw an overwhelming uptick in turnout, a 900% increase it went from 231 people being able to vote from all the jails in Colorado to well north of 2,300 people voted in a very small amount of time. So Senate Bill 1, the Colorado Voting Rights Act, does something that is really unique in this country that has never happened before, which is creating a protected class for incarcerated voters. So they have a legal remedy to seek a resolution to if their voting rights are being discriminated against while they're incarcerated in a county jail. Nowhere else in the nation do they have such a structure for incarcerated voters. But it's been 51 years since people serving pretrial or serving a misdemeanor were told by the Supreme Court they had the right to vote. But it's taken us this long to get to the point of adding these protections for folks, at least here in Colorado, and hopefully takes off and goes wild across the nation.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Someone just asked me this week, am I allowed to vote? And I just got out of prison after doing 16 years, and I do not know if I'm allowed to vote.
Yeah.
So
You are allowed to vote. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the only time you can't vote in Colorado is if you are serving a felony inside of a jail or a prison. Inside the jail or prison.
Oh, well,
halfway,
that's good.
yes, halfway house, you're eligible to vote.
Okay.
If you're on probation for a felony, you're eligible to vote. If you have a felony from another state, you're eligible to vote in Colorado. It's crazy. The first time I had this exact conversation was inside of the Jefferson County Jail where I was incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with my friend Jeff, and he was just kind of like, oh, I'm really bummed I'm never going to be able to vote again, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why aren't you going to vote? And he was like, well, I'm a felon, so I can't vote now. I was like, oh, that's not true in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, after a couple minutes of us going back and forth, there was tons of guys gathered around us listening in who were in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who had never voted before because they caught a case in their 20s that labeled them a felon, and they just assumed they couldn't vote because of this legacy of Jim Crow across our nation that did disenfranchise, and in many states still does disenfranchise folks. And so if you have your voice heard in your community, it is everything. It's like for me, when I was returning to community, it was like the foundation that helped me keep going, knowing that I had a voice in my community that couldn't be taken away from me. So that's Senate Bill 1. So the Colorado Voting Rights Act. And then we have House Bill 1214, which is prison bed utilization, the proper use of prison beds, pretty much. That what it does is there's this problem within the Department of Corrections of short timers, folks that maybe were on probation or were in a halfway house and didn't work out too well, so they're being sentenced to the Department of Corrections. A lot of these folks are getting 15-month sentences, but by the time you get your earned time for any pretrial confinement, for the time in the halfway house, you don't get it for probation, unfortunately. And we're seeing that all these folks are going in past their parole eligibility date. So in some cases, they were going in 3 months past their parole eligibility date. And so what we are trying to do, which is just crazy, it's just insane. It's just so we're just plucking this person out of community, throwing them in prison, and they're like, hey, you could have left 3 months ago.
Yeah, but 3 months counts.
Yeah, that's right.
It counts.
Yeah, it counts, yes. But you don't get any programs because you're not here long enough. We're not sure where to put you because your classification is going to be in flux all the time. And there's not a really great program for when you leave either, because you were in here for such a short amount of time. You probably lost your job, probably lost your living situation, probably lost everything, and good luck. And so 13% of folks that are being sent to the Department of Corrections every year are short timers, people that are only there for a minute. And so what this bill does, it creates a trigger moment when all their earned time is figured out and their final parole eligibility date is set. It triggers this if they're going in past their parole eligibility date, it triggers this thing 35B appeal, pretty much, that would allow the judge to reconsider their sentence, to be like, oh, I sentenced you to 15 months, but really you're only going to be in there for 8, and this isn't going to work out. You're not going to get anything that I think you need. So it gives them the opportunity to resentence them to a halfway house, or a sober living community, which is in this bill, which would be really great. Because a lot of folks, when I was in the halfway house, I was interacting with a lot of people that just couldn't stay sober. And so, but the halfway house wasn't really the right place for them. They should have been in a sober living community. And so, yeah, and that is just, this bill is in an attempt to help with the prison population issues that we're having in Colorado. We're running out of prison beds. We just are. And no one except for the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition is talking about it with any, the governor, as well as resisting any attempts to help take some of the pressure off. This bill wouldn't fix the bed problem we have in Colorado. We need some real genuine reforms, but it would keep the pressure off long enough for us to try to figure out some real solutions to deal with the overpopulation, the understaffing, and all the issues with the Department of Corrections. And so that's House Bill 1214. And then we also have Senate Bill 190, which is a special needs parole bill. So what it does is it just makes a lot of like technical fixes to like definitions of like how sick someone is, when do they become eligible. And the bill requires that someone has to serve at least 25% of their sentence before they become eligible for special needs parole. A lot of people also know special needs parole as compassionate release. So people that are really sick aren't going to get better. Right now, the system is this is our third attempt to try to reform this system. And it is just really wonky. It's very technical. And it's really hard for people to become or be granted special needs parole. And so we're trying to fix it again, this time allowing more input from community doctors and not just being the Department of Corrections doctor. The Department of Corrections is in a kind of a funky spot when it comes to special needs parole, because something that not a lot of people know is that people that are incarcerated are the only people in this country that have a constitutional right to medical care. And so there is this just like weird, where if we agree you need special needs parole, but that means we're publicly admitting that we can't give you the medical care that you need. And so they feel like they're kind of in this tug of war with it. And so we're trying to create a system where they don't feel like they're pinned in a corner or opening themselves up to litigation by letting people out. And hopefully get some of these elderly folk or even some young folk that are really sick inside of the prisons out. The biggest increase in cost for the Department of Corrections is medical care. And the largest growing population inside of the Department of Corrections are elderly folk. And after the passage last year of Prop 128, it's just going to get worse over the years. And so we need to start finding solutions now on how to deal with it, because folks convicted of certain violent crimes are going to have to serve 85% of their sentence before they even become eligible for earned time.
And that's Proposition 128?
Yeah, that was last year. It already passed. And so there's a lot of compound pressure that is starting to build on the Department of Corrections that is just going to feed into the crisis that is the Department of Corrections. And so, yeah, so hopefully Senate Bill 190 will help take some of that pressure off. And then I have two bills that I want to talk to you guys about that kind of lead into the craziness that is going on this next election, the next two elections, honestly, here in Colorado. So there's House Bill 1147, what it does is says this municipalities can have worse sentences than the state. Seems pretty reasonable. But across Colorado, we were seeing case after case after case of folks being sentenced. In some cases, there was this mother from Westminster who was sentenced to like 300 plus days on a charge. If she got the same charge on the state, would have been seven days. Yeah. And then like we're seeing other cases where municipalities like Pueblo County are like creating contempt of court cases. Now that one luckily was resolved in a separate bill, but we're starting to see this uptick of tough on crime motivation and sentencing changes that are happening on the muni level, where they feel like they have the ability to create their own justice system outside of the state to be able to do whatever with societal problems how they want to deal with it, which is disappear them into prisons and jails. And so 1147 is a really simple bill, honestly, and even has some carve-outs for some municipalities so that you can still have some flexibility. But right now it's under threat from the governor to be vetoed because of this home rule idea, a provision in the Colorado Constitution saying the municipalities have the right to write their own laws, to do whatever they want outside of the control of the state. But it is a clear constitutional issue here, where if you are arrested on one side of the street, they decide to give you 365 days. Arrested on another side of the street, you get 7. Like, it's just crazy. And so, yeah, we're really worried that this bill is going to get vetoed. There are 2 cases before the Colorado Supreme Court right now that are going to oral arguments in May that will discuss this issue specifically. And so the Colorado Supreme Court might rule saying municipalities can't have worse sentences than the state. And that will help alleviate the problem. But till then, we're still seeing these crazy cases, which is what leads actually to some of these ballot initiatives that are coming up in 2025 in Denver. So Advance Colorado is a dark money think tank who is very pro tough on crime, that is running ballot initiatives across the state. But in Denver specifically, they're running a bunch of anti-immigration ones, pretty much disassembling the sanctuary state of Denver, as well as adding a bunch of mandatory minimums for poverty crimes, like something like urinating in public, theft under $300, graffiti, like doing graffiti or defacing property. In some cases can be up to 120 days for your second offense in the county jail, which is just crazy. And so that is like one wave of these ballot initiatives, is this kind of like test balloon to see what can happen in a city like Denver, which is a pretty liberal city. If they can get something like that passed in Denver, then they feel like they'll probably be able to get it passed across the state. And so we see these theft charges, but then also this year we had a bill, Senate Bill 44, which was a refelonization of all possession of fentanyl, unknowingly or knowingly, because right now there's a stipulation in the law where you have to know that you're in possession of fentanyl under a certain amount to be able to be charged with it, because our drug supply is so unregulated and everything has fentanyl in it. You might not even know you have fentanyl. So it would like create different cut points for when you receive different levels of felonies, and then also creates like mandatory minimums of 32 years for possession of manufacturing equipment for pills, not even for manufacturing of fentanyl, just making the pills. And then on top of all that, it also has provisions that makes it to where if someone you are using drugs with and you share your drugs with passes away because of an overdose, you can be charged with murder. Not productive at all. It doesn't solve any issue. All you're doing is putting a drug user into prison. Yeah. And so that is coming on the 2026 statewide ballot. It's already been approved. They're going to start collecting signatures to get on the ballot. But also is a whole rewrite of the theft charges and auto theft charges, lowering all the financial thresholds to the point where it is going to balloon the prison system, because all the reforms that were done in the past to allow a lot of these cut points and all these financial layers to be misdemeanor level are all going to be wiped out, and they're all going to be felony level. And also create mandatory minimums as well. And then also if you are like working with more than one person, it's a mandatory sentence of 3 years. So if you and your buddy are running into a store and stealing stuff or whatever, or are working together to break into people's houses, doesn't matter. It's a mandatory minimum of 3 years. And so there's this major resurgence across the nation, but in particular in Colorado, this tough on crime policy agenda. And all these things are going to be on the ballot starting in this November here in Denver, and are going to start just rolling through. And so we're doing everything we can to organize a coalition of folks from across the political spectrum as well as across the issues spectrum to resist this ballot initiative fight. There is Michael Fields doesn't do just immigration and criminal justice. He does school choice. He does income tax cuts. He, like, you name it, that guy has a ballot initiative about it.
Michael Fields is...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Michael Fields is the head of Advance Colorado. So this is his brain, whatever you want. It's not brain trust. I don't know what it is. It's like evil, what it is, in my opinion. Just like blatantly attacking people who are struggling with substance abuse, as well as attacking, obviously, our unhoused population, and people in poverty, and making the crimes, quote unquote crimes, that they're being charged with, these mandatory minimums. I think 120 days will in a county jail would destroy a single mom's life who was in there stealing groceries, or yeah, it would just, she would lose her kids, lose housing, and if you like reach a certain level, you start losing your housing vouchers, you start losing all this kind of stuff. So it's pretty scary, honestly, out there. The battlefield, honestly, is moving away from the legislature fighting the tough on crime stuff, and is moving to the ballot, because Advance Colorado, Michael Fields have seen that they can't get stuff done at the legislature because of the makeup of the parties, and so he's moving to the ballot. And in 2024, he had huge success with Prop 128, passed with 60+%, and then Prop 130 as well, which added $350 million to police and only police. That passed with 55%. But we're not gonna let that happen again. We're gonna do everything in our power to like organize and fight these ballot initiatives.
How do you handle the role of information in these battles? Because with Prop 128, if I remember right, there was some pretty serious misinformation put out about how long felons actually spend in prison, or how much they actually serve of their sentence. Numbers as low as 43%, 46% of their sentences, which is obviously not true, at least not since 2003, when the sentences were enhanced to at least 75% of your sentence.
Yeah.
And so obviously that not being true, but it was probably very persuasive to a lot of people, thinking murderers, rapists, sex offenders are getting out after less than half of their prison sentence. Not true, but they don't know that. So how do you handle informing the public about these kind of things, which would probably give them a way different approach to how they would?
Totally. Yeah, that is so true what you're saying about how like people just didn't actually know. Like, no, like if you don't have involvement with the criminal justice system, why would you know that, right? And so it was very easy for the other side to come in and just spread misinformation and say whatever they wanted, cherry pick crime statistics to make it look like everything's really awful, even though crime is dropping crazy. Violent crime in particular is dropping like crazy. But it's very easy for them to just manipulate the data. And something I discovered last year when I was having conversations with people is when you give them just a little bit of information, it really flips their mind on how they actually feel about this situation. And so we at CCGRC have really committed to being the rebuttal to that, and like showing what true community safety looks like, what is the actual facts of what's going on, and just being open and honest with folks. So starting a really strong media campaign strategy, and then beyond building this coalition, like really building out a strong campaign to get the information into the everyday Coloradans' hands so they can make the best educated decision they can when it comes to voting on that ballot.
Some of the things you were saying about Advance Colorado earlier in the conversation made me think. I was talking with someone this week and they asked me a question. They said, when someone is saying something to you, you should ask them, what should I feel when you say this to me? What are you trying to make me feel? Yeah. So what do you think is going on with Advance Colorado? And
I think Advance Colorado is trying to pitch a public safety theory that was debunked after the Nixon era of mass incarceration is how we drive public safety. What we need to do is make sure these people that are a threat to our community, quote unquote, big quote unquote, are put away. That way we can guarantee the safety of our communities. I think that's their motive behind it, except for we know because of the data, we know because of the historical context of where we are now, that is just not true. That's not what works. Mass incarceration does not work. Disappearing people does not work in fixing mental health crises in our nation. It doesn't fix the homeless crisis in our nation. It doesn't fix the drug addiction crisis in our nation. What fixes those crises is community showing up, well-funded, supported to be able to care for individuals case by case. We create these blanket mandatory minimums that don't allow judges to have discretion about what was the circumstances of the crime. And it puts us into a really bad place. So I think that's where they're coming from. And, I had a conversation last year with a group of Republicans in the House who were, Senate Bill 72, the jail-based voting bill was up, and they're like, I don't know, why should we vote for this? Blah, blah, blah. Like, these aren't our people who are voting. These are Democrats that are voting. And because CCJRC is very based in data and facts, I was able to show them that actually 70% of people that voted for the Jefferson County Jail voted Republican. So this isn't like access to the ballot shouldn't be a partisan issue. Access to true public safety shouldn't be a partisan issue, but that's just where we are right now in our nation. But the criminal justice system seeps into every single aspect of our society, and it doesn't care if you're a Republican, it doesn't care if you're a Democrat. What it's doing is just removing you from community and where you should actually be. Now, I'm not an abolitionist. I don't think there's no purpose for prisons. I think there's some people that should probably be in prison that's just not working out. But I think a vast majority of people that get stuck into the prison system don't deserve to be there. Funny enough, a nonpartisan budget research guy at the Capitol who develops the Department of Corrections budget and helps audit it and do all that, asked the question this year, what is the purpose of minimum security prisons? It's like, why, if by the time they make it to minimum security, they should be at a halfway house. They should be in community. They shouldn't be locked up. He's like, he made the point, the Department of Corrections is very good at keeping people locked up. But by the time they reach a point where they're trusted enough to be in a prison, oftentimes doesn't have a fence. Why are they in prison? And it started quite the philosophical discussion, which I hope we can build off of.
So, Kyle, it's Monday. We're still in the middle or towards the end of the legislative session. What are maybe 1, 2, or even 3 things that we should be looking out for to come? Yeah.
Oh, man. So, number 1, I would keep an eye out on the news to see if Governor Polis does veto 1147, the immunity sentencing bill. Number 2 is keep your eye on the ballot initiatives. Keep your eye out on the fact that we're seeing new ballot initiatives show up every Friday, actually. So by Monday, they'll be up on the website related to criminal justice issues. One of them I didn't talk about because I'm still trying to figure out all the landscape of it was one that creates indeterminate sentences for people convicted of sex offenses, as well as mandatory minimums again. So I'll follow up in our next meeting and talk to you guys about that one. And then number 3, if you want to know what's going on at the legislature, really want to see what bills are moving, what bills aren't moving, I would really, really recommend going to ccjrc.org and signing up for our newsletter. We send out a weekly legislative update about what's going on at the Capitol, as well as the context around it. So you can understand it's not just words on a page. You can understand the story of what happened this past week at the legislature.
Up to the Minute is a production of Colorado Radio for Justice. Tune into our 24/7 broadcast on www.radioforjustice.org. Listen on the app from the App Store and Google Play. Catch this show and other original works shifting the narrative on the criminal legal system on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Colorado Radio for Justice.